is one of great interest, as it goes into details much more fully. Marduk hath seen what I, go my son Marduk, take a suckling pig, and at the head of the sick man put it, and take out its heart, and above the heart of the sick man put it, sprinkle its blood on the sides of the bed, and divide the pig over his limbs, and spread it on the sick man. Then cleanse thou that man with pure water from the deep, and wash him clean, and bring him near a censer and a torch, twice 7 loaves cooked in the ashes against the shut door place, and give the pig in his stead, and let the flesh be as his flesh, and let the blood as his blood, and let him hold it, and the heart be as his heart. When thou hast placed upon his heart, and let him hold it, that the may be in his stead, that the pig may be a substitute for him, that the evil spirit and the evil demon may stand aside, that a kindly spirit and a kindly guardian be present. The most remarkable parallel to this spell is contained in the New Testament in the story of the Gadarene swine. The devils which possessed the 2 men beseech Jesus Christ if he cast them out and send them in a herd of swine, which of the feeding is close at hand. The word sutra is a word that's used both for swine and demon, by the way. So that could be, what was meant. But we don't know because it's a Greek text. When the devils leave the man and take up their abode in the herd, the swine, according to the story, go mad and rush down the hill into the water, where they are drowned. The idea is quite in accord with beliefs of tribal people. The diseased devil leaves the man at the command of a higher power and is transferred into some beast which, either dead or alive, acts as a substitute. Celis monk Marcus of Mesopotamia explains that the devils entered the swine not from the hostile interaction, but from a vehement desire for animal heat. Animal heat? Okay. Dialogue on the Operation of Demons, 1843. From the Assyrian incantation, it is easy to infer that the pig was not unclean in the way that it is now held to be by the Jews or Muslims. While Muslims don't think of it in the superstitious way we think of the pig and the dog as just animals you don't eat. You don't transfer the disease-carrying elements of certain animals. That doesn't, The latter believe that the extremities of flesh can be used as a medicine, and Schwemmer relates that Arab patients would come to him for a small piece to cure one in the desperate straits. Swine fat appears to have been also in need in Assyrian medicine, and it is recorded in an astrological report that a sow farrowed with one of the piglets devil with 8 legs and 2 tails. The monster was probably conserved in salt. It's one of the hemorrhology texts, and it's laid down that if a man eats the flesh of a swine on the 30th of Ab, when the moon is invisible, boils will break out upon him, or if he eats the flesh of swine or oxen on the 27th of Tisri, various things will happen to him. So that is unclean in a different sense other than the mere physical one, related to taboos, related to entities. Arabia 281 mentions the suckling pig sacrificed among the Greeks. For other instances of pigs in magic, on their unclean character, Fraser's Golden Bough, 304 in Atonement. Okay, there are reports of magicians and astrologers, because there's all sorts of animals attributed to, constellations, or which vary per culture. Mentho makes mentions of marvels, like the 8-legged lamb. views, and the Egyptian Book of the Dead mentions pigs too. The very fact that certain things are prohibited admits the presumption of that pork was lawful as food on other occasions. So, we're seeing implications that some people would think that, oh, it wasn't because it was unclean, it was because it was a sacred animal to this other cult, so we don't want to be taking part in that transubstantiation sort of ritual. If there is another religious text prescribing a pig in ritual, sacrifice a pig before Shamash, and thou shalt imprison their sorcerers in the body of the pigs. Could anything be clearer? In this next case, although the word kupuru is not used, the ceremony is similar, and approaches closely to some of the Arab ritual quoted further on. It's interesting to see the ox regarded as taboo as much as the pig. Because the ox isn't a scavenger beast, there's not really the biological reasons to think, that would be unclean, but taboos aren't always about just clean and unclean, right? It is well known that among certain of the Semites, ox was one of the taboo animals. Because of Baal. The people who believed that God had a son was behind a lot of this, or that there was some sort of deist thing that God created the world and something else took over. It is well known among certain of the Semites the ox was one of the taboo animals, also was the camel, and both of these later on in Mesopotamia. It is also a great insult in Mosul to say that the man eats of their flesh. An Assyrian incantation shows the tendency towards the idea of paying respect to oxen, perhaps in a reminiscence to an older totem worship. The great ox, mighty ox, and treadeth pure fodder, hath come into the meadows, raising up plenty, sowing kernels, making bright the field. My pure hands pour libations before these. Inanimate things, according to Muslimin, are all clean and do not defile, except wine and intoxicating drinks, and obviously other drugs too, but people have become lax in more and more in recent centuries and years of, if the doctor prescribes me an intoxicant that I don't need for survival, that I don't need to cure me of an illness, I just, going to change how I feel, or, maybe it was just, And, by the way, caffeinated beverages, the cot, the kahwa, getting rumbly in the tumbly. That's not a good degree of that, but I'm going to continue because I think I'm fine. Because it's still high enough in the stomach. Maybe I shouldn't have said that. All this talking about unclean things. Animals are all clean except the dog and the pig. Well, are all clean except the dog and the pig? Actually, no. The animals that you can't eat in Islamic belief are the things with the tangs and the claws and the fangs, the meat-eating land animals, the scavengers. You don't eat rats and all that. When dead, however, all animals are unclean except man, fish, locust, worms, and apples, and insects, like the fly and the beetle. Okay, the incantation. An evil fever rests in the body of the man. It hath covered the wanderer with a garment. It holdeth his hands and feet. It racketh his limbs. The great prince Ea, lord of magic, Ea, laid a kid at the head of the front of him. Unto the chieftain he spake, saying, the kid is a substitute for mankind. The kid, for his life, he giveth. The head of the kid, for the head of the man, he giveth. The breast of the kid, for the breast of the man, he giveth. Of the kid, of the man, he giveth. Family's been tracking dog dander, and they know I'm allergic. The head of the kid for the head of the man he giveth, the neck of the kid for the neck of the man he giveth, the breast of the kid for the breast of the man he giveth, that of the kid for the of the man he giveth. By the magic sorry. By the magic of the word of Ea, the son of Eridu, let the incantation of the deep of Eridu never be unloosed. For the Muslimin of the present day, the form of the substitution still holds good. And, forgot the right invocation, right? For the sneeze. And you can say, Yarhamukallah, in response. At the shrine of Abdul Qadir, the largest masjid in Baghdad, the Indian Muslims who come thither on pilgrimage offer sacrifices there. There is no place of Islamic pilgrimage in Baghdad or anywhere. Some people say Damascus, but otherwise Mecca, Medina, Jerusalem. There are narrations to support maybe that, but not Baghdad. Who come thither on pilgrimage offer sacrifices there. They vow that if the man who is ill brings to recover, he shall go to the shrine. He is stripped to the waist, and 2 men lift a lamb or kid above his head, and bathe his face, shoulders, and the upper part of his body with the blood. While the butcher kills the animal, the sheikh repeats the first surah of the Quran. Well, there's a lot of people with hodgepodge religions, right? They also wrap him in the skin of the animal. It's uncertain how many more lines the he giveth thing we went over earlier relates. According to the Algerian Jews, there's a custom somewhat similar. To cure sickness, they go with an Arab sorceress to a spring, kill a black chicken. Rooster, let's say rooster. And smear with the blood of the chest, forehead, etc. the patient. A lot of people don't. Yeah, people said cock instead of rooster back in the day, so. Smear the blood, the chest, and the forehead, etc. of the patient. And then they light a fire and sprinkle fire and patient with blood. In Palestine, it is the same. The very morning, we visited the shrine of Nebi Yehuda. A goat was killed for a woman of the feudal Arabs who was suffering from the fever, going through the hardship of the fever. They put some of the blood on her forehead and some on the wall of the makam. The form of the vow used for the restoration of the child who is ill is, O Nebi Yehuda, Prophet Judah, have mercy on this boy, my son. Well, Judah's not a biblical, he's a biblical character, but not a prophet. The night of Tisri is called Ed el-Jaj, the Feast of the Chickens, on the account of the number of chickens slaughtered by the Jews throughout the land. Every individual should provide himself with a chicken, its color white if possible, a rooster for every male, a hen for every female, and for a pregnant woman, a rooster and 2 hens, that is, a hen for herself and 1 of each sex for the unborn child, to make sure he or she is represented rightly. The head of the family must sacrifice the birds, first whirling each one 3 times around his head, exclaiming each time, "Let this cock be an atonement for me. Let it be my substitute. Let the bird die, but let life and happiness be to me and to all Israel. Amen." I don't know, they probably say counterclockwise. He then kills the bird, saying, "I have deserved thus to die. The blood is poured out on the ground," as it's always done when Jews kill, "and the chickens are eaten." At Musala, where there's a shrine for good for sore eyes, if a man sick with Ophthalmia takes a rooster, after cutting off its head, puts a drop of blood in each eye, and gives the rooster to some poor person he will recover. Another Assyrian exorcism against headache runs: take a bundle of twigs, and at the confluence of two streams, take thou water, and perform thy pure incantation over the water, and with thy pure exorcisms cleanse, and with this water sprinkle the man, son of his entity, and Masila is often a place where people are where two streams come together. Is often labeled as holy. Okay. With this water, sprinkle the man, son of his entity, and bind upon his head. When he eats, let him be sated. At eventide, cut it off, and cast it into the broad places, that the sickness of his head may be assuaged, and that the headache, which is like the dew hath fallen, may be removed. And there's some doubt about him letting him be sated, but the bundle of twigs, also known as a faggot, the value of this translation is fairly well vouched for, occurs also in another incantation. Perform thy goodly incantation, and make perfect the waters thereof with priestcraft, and with thy pure incantation do thou cleanse the sick man. And take a bundle of twigs, pour the waters thereof on it. The Malagasy, who considers all diseases afflicted by an evil spirit, have recourse to a diviner, who removes the sickness by means of a faditra. This is some object such as a little grass, ashes, sheep, and a pumpkin, the water with which the patient has raised his mouth, and when the priest has counted on it the evils which may afflict the patient, and charged the faditra to take them away forever, it is thrown away, and the malady with it. The following is an excellent instance of the removal of a taboo by purification and fumigation, where the taboo is expelled to a clean place, the incantation. Pure water, water from the Euphrates, which in a place, water which hath been kept aright in the deep, the pure month of Ea hath purified it. The children of the deep, 7 are they purify the water, cleanse it, and make it limpid. Before your father, Ea, before your mother, Damkina, may it be pure, be bright, be clean, that the evil tongue may stand aside. The prayer, repeating the incantation 3 times for the bowl of water. The incantation. The river entity, brightly shining, before whom is the ban, whose attack like a demon bindeth on all lands, as the twilight doth the heights above. May Shamash, when he riseth, remove the darkness thereof, that it may not be held back in the house, that the ban may go forth to the desert, a clean place. O ban, by heaven be thou exorcised, by earth be thou exorcised. And the prayer for removing the ban, fumigate him on the bank of a river. The incantation. Fire entity, chief, high upon earth. Hero, son of the deep, high upon earth. O fire entity, by thy pure fire, thou bringest light into the house of darkness. Thou settest a destiny to all things named. It is thou that meltest copper and lead. It is thou that purgest silver and gold. It is thou that art the comrade of an Nkasi. It is thou that repelleth the evil that cometh by night. May the members of the man, the son of his entity, be cleansed. May he be bright as the heaven. May he shine like the earth. May he be resplendent as the midst of heaven. May the evil tongue stand aside. And the prayer for removing the ban. In the instance a purification by water. We may perhaps see the original idea of wiping away, as in the Syrian kafar, in the Malay ceremony already quoted. The magician wipes away the taboo with the limes. The Tonga, a person under a taboo, caused by touching a chief, cannot feed himself until the taboo has been removed by his touching the soles of a superior chief's feet with his hands, and then rinsing his hands in water, or, if water is scarce, rubbing them with the juice of the plantain or banana. When a Maori chief becomes taboo by touching the sore head of his child, he would on the following day rub his hands over with potato or fern root, which had been cooked over a sacred fire. This was then carried to the head of the family in the female line, who ate it. We can now return to the Levitical taboo on rash oaths. It is less clear what we are to understand as the real necessity for an atonement for this. Obviously, it is absurd to suppose that the same offering would compensate for oaths involving undertakings of both extreme difficulty and extreme triviality. If this were so, a man need only admit that his oath was a rash one, and offer an animal to be exempt from the performance of any sworn act of devotion. From the quotation from Leviticus 5, given below, it is plain that such oaths were reckoned parallel to the unclean taboo of contagion, for which similar atonements must be made to free the man from his ban. Does a man who swears to perform a rash act lay himself under a taboo until he has completed his task? In the Islamic point of view, by that I mean, the one we're going to find in here, any translation of the Quran really, and there's Arabic for that, so we don't have to worry about that aspect of that, right? It was only, because it's not only translation, which I'm talking about. The blame is not per se laid on those who don't take oaths seriously. And if you do take an oath seriously, it's the repentance is very simple. And if you do take oaths seriously, if the oath is towards wrong, well, there may, you're never bound to fulfill any oath that you do, making oaths to do wrong. Okay, Leviticus 5. And if anyone sin, in that he heareth the voice of adjuration, he being a witness, whether he hath seen or known, if he do not utter it, then he shall bear his iniquity. Or if anyone toucheth any unclean thing, whether it be the carcass of an unclean beast, or the carcass of unclean cattle, or the carcass of unclean creeping things, and it be hidden from him, and he be unclean, then he shall be guilty. Or if he touch the uncleanliness of man, whether his uncleanliness, or whether he is unclean, and it be hid from him, when he knoweth of it, then he shall be guilty. If anyone swear rashly with his lips to do evil, or to do good, whatsoever it be that a man shall utter rashly with an oath, and it be hid from him, when he knoweth of it, then he shall be guilty in one of these things. And if it shall be, when he be guilty of one of these things, then he shall confess that wherewith he has sinned. And he shall bring his guilt offering unto Yahweh for the sin which he hath sinned, a female from the flock of a lamb or goat, for a sin offering, and the priest shall make atonement for him as concerning his sin. Now, in the Islamic point of view is a little bit different than the biblical point of view, in the respect that if there's dry contact, both the person and the dog or the pig is dry, at most you got to brush. Might be good to brush off, but even that's not always necessary. It's the wet transfer. It's the consuming of the flesh that is the risk, and that's really what we find. It's not that you petted a dog and, That's it. Now, touching a dead person, that could be, an issue, but not to the extent where you got to separate yourself from days from everybody else. It's just a standard thing. That's probably going too far, isn't it? Take the instances in Greek mythology, such as Miss Jane Harrison, who recognizes the same difficulty, has collected them. It is less obvious at first why Sathagia, offerings destroyed, were always employed in the takings of oaths. In the ordinary ritual of the taking of oaths, the oath taker actually stood upon the pieces of the slaughtered animal. Tyndareus sacrificed a horse and made Helen's suitors take an oath, causing them to stand on the cut-up pieces of the horse. Having made them take the oath, he buried the horse. It was said Heracles had given an oath to the sons of Neleus, or no use, on the cut pieces of a boar. Pausanias says, with the men of old days, the rule was, as regards a sacrificial animal on which an oath had been taken, that it should be no more accounted as edible for man. Miss Harrison explains the custom of standing on the fragments of the victim as pointing clearly to the identification of the oath-taker and sacrifice. The victim was hewn in bits, so if the oath-taker perjure himself, will he be hewn in bits? I venture, with the difference, to put forward another explanation in view of the biblical law. The oath-taker calls some supernatural power to witness that he makes a promise. He thereby renders himself taboo for some reason, as the Levitical parallels show. The meaning of the Hebrew word for swearing is to come under the influence of 7 things. Possibly to repeat a promise 7 times. Compare the Assyrian Sebete Shu Anapan Ereb. Elu Shamsi Mamet Shu Utmeh. Constant with the rules. For other unclean taboos, he presents an atonement to rid himself of this taboo, to admit of his continuing as an ordinary member of society in intercourse with his fellows. It does not exempt him from the necessity of carrying out his vow. It merely removes the contagious taboo which he has incurred by the act of invoking divine power. It is a savage analogy, I think, a plausible explanation. The Greek instances are clear. At the very moment the vow is taken, the oath-taker kills the beast, which is not used as food and hence cannot be considered as a feast shared with the entity he has invoked. It has made away with as charged with dangerous influence, just as the unclean atonements are in the Hebrew law. Javon's remarks on oaths are distinctly pertinent here. Probably the earliest oaths are those of congregation, and the person thus freeing himself from the charge made against him does so by voluntarily making himself taboo, by eating fetish or otherwise devoting himself to his entity. Lastly, the sins committed wittingly were all cleansed by an atonement, both in Leviticus and the Sherpu series. Offenses indicating more serious misdeeds than the mere infringement of a taboo are placed side by side with breaches of uncleanness. Yet in the Assyrian series, either is recognized as the possible cause of sickness in man, and the Hebrew law both demanded an atonement. Some are undoubtedly the direct descendants of breaches of the demon taboos, and others are clearly offenses against holy things belonging to the tribal entity. 2 explanations are therefore open to us. One is that every breach of taboo was visited by demoniac possession, either directly or through the divine wrath, which caused the angels and ministers to inflict their plagues on mankind. The other is that the religious beliefs grow and the origins were forgotten. Men brought atonements for every breach of taboo, arguing by analogy that they could remove the risk of punishment by what ultimately was regarded as a peculiar offering. The original object of the atonement was disregarded, and, as undoubtedly appears in the Old Testament, the carcasses of beasts slaughtered as substitutes to attract the plague demon became the offerings of men guilty of presumptuous sin. The last stage is reached when the carcass is eaten by the priest as though it were an ordinary sacrifice. Originally, then, we may presume from the meaning of the word far in connection with savage methods of cleansing taboo, that the atonement ceremony was indicated to wash away a demoniac or sin taboo in water. In other words, the demon was to be transferred to water and thus removed. In addition to this, we have the sin offering, which was originally a beast substituted for the man, whom the demon had attacked, which was intended to receive the devil after he had been exorcised. Now, I'm not going to call dogs or any animal that we don't eat, wrong or whatever. And I'm not going to say that we should sacrifice dogs to appease the demons. People can make their own choices, but I don't think it's necessary. Do you?